Welcome to Mr. Horror, where today we have 3 spine-chilling true trucker horror stories that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Get ready to be scared out of your wits as we take you on a journey through the dark and dangerous world of trucking. Truckers often have to navigate the dark and desolate highways of the world, spending countless hours on the road with nothing but their thoughts to keep them company. And while many of them have seen some strange and creepy things on their travels, none compare to the horror that befell 2 truckers on a seemingly routine job. Tom and Mike were longtime friends who had been working as truckers for years. They had seen it all, from crazy drivers to unexplainable sightings on the side of the road, but they had never experienced anything quite like what happened to them on a dark and stormy night. They were driving down a deserted highway in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the sound of rain hitting the roof of their truck. The only light was the glow of their headlights illuminating the empty road ahead. Suddenly, they saw a figure walking along the side of the road. They slowed down to get a better look and saw that it was a woman soaked from head to toe and shivering in the rain. They pulled over and offered to give her a ride. The woman was grateful for their kindness and climbed into the back of the truck. As they continued on their journey, Tom and Mike tried to make small talk with the woman, but she seemed distant and unresponsive. Suddenly, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream and lunged at Tom, scratching and biting him with inhuman strength. Mike tried to pull her off, but she was too strong for him. They swerved off the road and crashed into a ditch. As they tried to gather their bearings, they realized that the woman was nowhere to be found. It was like she had disappeared into thin air. Shaken and injured, Tom and Mike stumbled out of the truck and began walking down the highway, hoping to find some help. But what they found instead was even more terrifying. The road was lined with crosses and other symbols of death, and they could hear strange whispers in the wind. They soon realized that they were not alone on that desolate highway, and they were in grave danger. But little did they know, their nightmare was only just beginning. As they walked, Tom and Mike saw a figure in the distance, illuminated by a dim light. They cautiously approached, hoping to find help, but as they got closer, they realized that it was not a person at all. It was a scarecrow, swaying back and forth in the wind. Feeling uneasy, they continued down the road, their injuries worsening with every step. They soon came across an old abandoned gas station and decided to take shelter inside. As they huddled together, trying to stay warm, they heard strange noises coming from outside. It sounded like footsteps and whispers, but they couldn't see anyone. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a figure emerged from the darkness. It was the woman from earlier, her clothes torn and her eyes wild. She lunged at them again, but this time they were able to fight back. In the struggle, they noticed something strange. Her skin seemed to be peeling away, revealing something dark and otherworldly beneath. In that moment, they realized that they had encountered something far beyond their understanding. They were trapped in a nightmare with no escape in sight. As the night wore on, they heard more and more noises outside, strange voices and footsteps that seemed to be getting closer. They huddled together, praying for the morning to come. But when the sun finally rose, they knew that their ordeal was far from over. They had survived the night, but they were still in the clutches of something terrifying and unknown. They knew that they had to find a way out before it was too late. Tom and Mike managed to find a way to escape the gas station and stumbled upon a small town. As they entered, they noticed that the locals were staring at them with suspicion and fear in their eyes. But they didn't care. They were just grateful to be alive. They found a hospital and were treated for their injuries, but they knew that they could never forget what they had experienced. Months passed, and Tom and Mike tried to put the horror behind them, but it haunted them every night in their dreams. They eventually quit their job as truckers and went their separate ways. But they never forgot each other, and they would often talk about that fateful night. They knew that they had encountered something beyond human comprehension, something that could not be explained by science or reason. And so, the story of the 2 truckers who survived a brush with the supernatural was passed down through generations, becoming a legend of the dark and desolate highways. But for Tom and Mike, it was a nightmare that they could never forget. It was a cold winter night when Jack was driving his semi-truck through the mountains, his only company the sound of his engine and the radio. The roads were icy and treacherous, but Jack was used to driving in these conditions. He had been a trucker for years and had seen it all, or so he thought. As he was driving through a particularly desolate stretch of road, he saw something in the distance. It was a figure standing in the middle of the road with its back turned towards him. Jack honked his horn, hoping to get the figure's attention, but it remained still. As he got closer, Jack realized with horror that the figure was not human. It was tall and skeletal, with skin stretched tightly over its bones. Its eyes were empty sockets, and it had a sickening grin on its face. Jack swerved to avoid it, but the figure seemed to move with him, always staying in his path. As Jack drove faster and faster, the figure seemed to gain on him, its bony fingers tapping against his window. Jack was paralyzed with fear, unable to move as the figure reached through the window and grabbed him by the throat. Jack struggled to break free, but the figure was too strong. It dragged him out of the truck and into the cold night air. The last thing Jack remembered was the figure's grotesque smile as it devoured him whole. Days later, Jack's truck was found abandoned on the side of the road, its cargo untouched. No trace of Jack was ever found, leaving his family and friends to wonder what had happened to him on that dark and desolate stretch of road. The news of Jack's disappearance spread quickly among the trucking community, and many of his colleagues shared their own strange experiences on that same stretch of road. Some had seen the same figure, while others had reported feeling a presence in their truck cab, like something was watching them. Rumors started to circulate about a curse that had been placed on the road by the spirits of Native Americans who had been mistreated and displaced by white settlers. Some even claimed that the figure Jack had seen was a vengeful spirit seeking revenge for the wrongs that had been done to its people. Despite the warnings and rumors, some truckers continued to drive that road, driven by the demands of their job and the need to make a living. But as more and more disappearances were reported, the road became known as the Highway of Death, and many truckers avoided it at all costs. But for some, the allure of adventure and the promise of a good paycheck were too great to resist. And so, the Highway of Death continued to claim its victims, leaving behind only rumors and speculation about what truly lurked on that desolate stretch of road. Many years after Jack's disappearance, a group of paranormal investigators set out to uncover the truth about the Highway of Death. Armed with high-tech equipment and an unwavering determination, they ventured down the road, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. As they drove, they felt a sense of unease and fear, like something was watching them. But they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. And they did. They captured images and recordings of the same figure that had haunted Jack, as well as other unexplainable phenomena. Their findings sparked a nationwide debate about the supernatural and the existence of ghosts. Some dismissed it as a hoax, while others believed that it was evidence of a darker, unknown world lurking just beyond our own. Regardless of the skeptics, the Highway of Death remains a cautionary tale for those who dare to venture into the unknown. For those who do, they may never return, lost to the darkness and the unknown horrors that lie in wait. It was a moonless night when John, a seasoned trucker, was driving through the backroads of rural America. The only source of light was his headlights and the occasional flicker of lightning in the distance. John was tired and he desperately needed to get some rest, but he was behind schedule and needed to make up time. As he drove through a particularly desolate stretch of road, John saw something in the distance. It was a woman, standing on the side of the road, waving her arms frantically. John slowed down and rolled down his window, but before he could ask if she needed help, the woman lunged at him, screaming in terror. John was caught off guard and tried to push her away, but she was too strong. It was then that he saw her face, distorted by fear and anger, and realized that something was not right. He tried to speed away, but the woman clung to his truck, her fingernails digging into the metal. As John drove faster and faster, the woman seemed to gain on him, her face twisted into a mask of fury. John was terrified, but he knew he couldn't let her catch him. He pushed his truck to its limits, driving recklessly through the winding roads, but the woman stayed with him, her screams echoing through the night. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the woman let go, disappearing into the darkness. John was shaken and confused, unsure of what had just happened. He pulled over to catch his breath, but he knew he couldn't stay there for long. He had to keep driving, but the memory of the woman's face would haunt him for a long time to come. As John drove on, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still following him. He kept checking his mirrors, expecting to see the woman's face staring back at him, but there was nothing there. He tried to tell himself that it was just his imagination, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't until he reached his destination and stepped out of his truck that he realized the truth. The woman's fingernails had left deep scratches on the side of his truck, but they weren't the only marks. There were also handprints, dozens of them, covering the entire length of his trailer. John was horrified. He had been driving all night with something, or someone, clinging to his truck. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that it was something he would never forget. From that day on, he made sure to avoid driving on back roads at night, especially in rural areas where anything could be lurking in the darkness. The scratches on his truck were a constant reminder of that terrifying night, and John could never shake the feeling that the woman, or whatever it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. He knew that he had been lucky to get away, but he couldn't help but wonder who else might not be so fortunate. Months went by, and John tried his best to push the incident out of his mind. He continued to drive his truck, but he made sure to avoid back roads and rural areas as much as possible. But one night, as he was driving down a familiar stretch of highway, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing on the side of the road was the same woman he had encountered all those months ago. She was staring at him with the same look of fear and anger, and as he drove by, she lunged at his truck once again. This time, John was ready. He had installed a dash camera in his truck, and he was determined to capture whatever was happening. As he sped away, the woman disappeared once again into the darkness, but this time, John had proof. He reviewed the footage and couldn't believe what he saw. The woman was no longer alone. There were others, shadowy figures that seemed to be following him, their faces twisted into grotesque expressions. John knew that he had stumbled upon something truly terrifying. He didn't know what these beings were or what they wanted, but he knew that they were not of this world. From that day on, he dedicated himself to finding answers, traveling the country, and investigating reports of similar encounters. Years went by, and John became a renowned expert in the paranormal. He had amassed a wealth of knowledge and had seen things that most people could never even imagine. But he never forgot that night on the backroads, the night that changed his life forever. And as he lay on his deathbed, surrounded by his family and loved ones, he knew that he had finally found the answers he had been searching for. Thank you for tuning into these 3 true scary trucker horror stories. We hope that they kept you on the edge of your seat and gave you a taste of the eerie and unpredictable experiences that truckers can encounter on the road. If you enjoy these stories, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more spine-tingling tales in the future. And remember, the next time you're driving down a desolate highway in the middle of the night, keep your eyes peeled for anything unusual. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows.